There is a specific moment in adult life when intelligent people stop trying to be understood. It does not happen all at once. It happens slowly, across years of being almost heard, almost gotten, almost known. Until one day, you simply stop reaching for the words. If you have ever noticed yourself explaining less than you used to, this was made specifically for you. In the next few minutes, you will hear 5 truths about what happens when someone stops trying to be understood. Truths that will explain not just why you did it, but exactly what it has cost you since. Some of these you have already felt, quietly, for years. Others will name something you assumed was simply your personality. And one of them, pay close attention when we get there, will explain why the people who stop explaining themselves are often the ones who had the most worth explaining. Most people, across enough years, settle into being understood reasonably well by the people around them. Their reactions make sense to others. Their decisions track. The gap between what they mean and what people hear stays small enough not to matter. That is not a criticism of them. It is simply how most communication is calibrated to work. But somewhere in your adult life, you noticed the gap did not close. Psychologists call this chronic miscommunication fatigue, the slow exhaustion that comes from repeatedly being almost understood, never quite landing the full truth of what you meant. The problem is, no one warns you what happens next. You do not become bitter. You become quiet. And what was once your willingness to explain yourself, to keep trying, keep clarifying, slowly turns into something else entirely. What we are about to cover will show you exactly what that something else cost you, and what it is not too late to get back. Truth number 1. You did not become guarded. You became efficient. Researchers in interpersonal communication describe this as selective disclosure, narrowing, the gradual process by which a person reduces the amount of their inner life they offer to others, not out of secrecy, but out of accumulated cost-benefit experience. Put simply, you ran the math over years without meaning to, and the math told you that explaining yourself fully rarely paid off the way it used to. Think about the last time you almost said something true in a conversation and then, mid-sentence, scaled it back to something simpler. Something safer. You did not lie. You just gave the version that required less translation. You have gotten so good at this that most people in your life have no idea how much editing happens before a single sentence leaves your mouth. This is not dishonesty. This is a mind that learned through repetition exactly how much truth a given room can actually hold. You did not become harder to read. You became fluent in knowing what was worth saying out loud, and what comes next explains the actual price of that fluency. Truth number 2. The people closest to you know less of you than they think they do. Psychology has a term for this: the intimacy gap, the measurable distance between how well someone believes they know you and how much of your actual inner experience you have shared with them. Studies on long-term relationships show this gap tends to widen with intelligence and self-containment, not shrink. Here is what no one tells you about that. The people who love you are often operating on a version of you that is several years and several edits out of date. Your partner, your closest friend, your sibling. They know the version of you that existed back when you were still fully explaining yourself. Since then, you have changed in ways you stopped narrating, not because you were hiding it, because somewhere along the way, narrating it stopped feeling worth the effort. This is not a betrayal of the relationship. It is simply what happens when explaining yourself becomes a second job you quietly resigned from. The loneliest part of being known is realizing you stopped updating the people who love you. This is only the surface of it. Truth 3 explains where this pattern actually started. Truth number 3. Somewhere, a specific conversation taught you this lesson, and you never noticed it happening. Researchers in attachment and developmental psychology describe this as a disconfirmation event, a specific moment, often unremarkable on the surface, where an attempt at being deeply understood failed badly enough that the brain quietly updates its strategy going forward. It is rarely dramatic. It is usually small, a joke that fell flat at exactly the wrong moment, A vulnerable sentence met with a blank look. A moment of real honesty that got laughed off as intense. Stop for a second. Think about it. There is probably one specific moment, maybe decades old, where you can almost remember deciding, without deciding, to dial it back from then on. You may not even remember the moment exactly, but your nervous system does. It has been running that protocol ever since. This is not damage. This is adaptation. A mind that learned a lesson well, perhaps too well, and never got the update that the lesson no longer applies. You are still protecting yourself from a room you left years ago. We are halfway through, and I want to be direct with you for a moment. The first 3 truths explained how this happened to you, but truths 4 and 5 explain what it has actually cost, and more importantly, whether it can still be undone. Truth 5, in particular, may change how you think about the next conversation you have today. Truth number 4, you have mistaken being low maintenance for being at peace. Researchers studying long-term emotional suppression describe what happens here as adaptive self-silencing, a pattern where a person genuinely believes they have stopped needing to be understood, when in fact, they have simply stopped expecting it. This is the distinction almost no one makes. Peace looks calm from the outside, so does resignation. They are not the same thing, even though they wear the same face. You tell people you are fine with how things are. You have convinced yourself you do not need anyone to fully get it anymore, that you have made peace with being slightly misread by almost everyone in your life. But peace does not come with the specific, quiet ache you feel when someone gets a detail about you exactly right by accident. That ache is not nothing. That ache is the part of you that never actually stopped wanting to be known. It just stopped expecting it. This is not weakness. This is evidence that the need never left. Only the hope did. You did not stop needing to be understood. You only stopped expecting it, and your body still knows the difference. The final truth is the one that changes everything once you actually hear it. Truth number 5. The fact that you ever tried this hard to be understood means there was something worth understanding. This is the part most people who give up on being known never get told. The depth of your withdrawal is directly proportional to the depth of what you were originally offering. People with shallow inner lives do not develop elaborate strategies for protecting themselves from being misunderstood. There is nothing complex enough underneath to misread. The very sophistication of your retreat, the editing, the narrowing, the quiet resignation is itself evidence of how much was actually there to explain. You have spent years treating your own complexity as the problem, as the reason things got harder, the reason people pulled away, the reason explaining yourself eventually felt pointless. But the complexity was never the problem. The room simply ran out of room before you ran out of depth. That does not mean it is too late. It means the right audience for the fuller version of you may simply not have arrived yet, or may already be closer than you think, waiting for you to try again with them specifically. You did not stop being worth understanding. You just stopped believing the right person was still listening. Everything we have covered today is not 5 separate disappointments. It is one continuous story about a mind that tried, for years, to be fully known, and slowly, reasonably, adjusted its expectations when that did not happen the way it hoped. You were never cold. You were never too complicated to bother with. You were never asking for more than was fair. You were a person who kept trying long after most people would have stopped, and the quiet you eventually settled into was not defeat. It was simply the cost of caring that much, for that long, without the right return. Once you understand this about yourself, something shifts. Not because every future conversation suddenly goes deeper, because you stop mistaking your own silence for proof that you were never worth the effort. You were always worth it. You simply stopped finding rooms that matched what you were offering. You did not give up on being understood. You just stopped explaining yourself to people who had already decided not to listen. If you have spent years quietly editing yourself down to something easier to understand, I hope what you heard today gives you something solid to hold on to. Not just information, understanding. The kind that does not fade by tomorrow. The kind that changes not just how you see your own silence, but how you see what it actually meant all along. You were never the problem. If this resonated with you, If you recognized yourself somewhere in what we covered today, subscribe. Because this channel exists specifically for people who think deeply and are ready to understand themselves at a level most people never reach. And if there is a part of your own mind you would like understood next, leave it in the comments. Your next video may be the one you ask for.